Hello. First things first, I am aware that the sound quality is not great. Um, Please don't leave comments telling me that because I'm aware of the problem. I did make a video about this, and the situation at the moment is these headphones just aren't wonderful and they're slightly damaged. Tomorrow, I'm going to purchase a new set, and hopefully that will improve the situation. But I do want to go ahead and make this video simply for it being there because when something is on my mind, I need to talk about it. So bear with me. Um, all I could do is say sorry for that. I know it isn't ideal, but I think it's still audible because I've watched the videos myself and it's still, you know, it's not ideal, but I can hear myself, so I assume other people can hear enough to leave comments. Anyway, that having been said, the subject I want to speak about is mental health. Very important subject. And it's a very topical subject these days, especially in the UK. We hear quite a lot about this. Um, and in a way, that's a good thing. It's good that it's out there. It's good that people are discussing it. There is a campaign called Time to Change, and they have a number of online videos where they're interviewing people who have been through mental health problems, especially depression. Um, and it's sort of a publicity campaign that they've launched with all these interviews. And there's one in particular that is interesting. And basically, in the video, it shows three guys kind of walking through the streets of London. And there's kind of aggro music playing. One of the guys, I think, has a stool, one of them has a towel. And the whole pitch of this is like the cornermen in a boxing ring. And they're kind of walking through the suburban streets, and they go into this busy kind of garage. And they ask the garage owner where the guy is. I forget his name in the video, but he says he's over there. And basically, they kind of put their hand on his shoulder and then they say, "We're here for you, mate." And then the whole pitch is kind of like the scenario is imagine this is a boxing ring and we're in your corner. That is the pitch that they're making. So clearly, this is catered towards men, and it's interesting because it's a very different approach than that which is sometimes used in mental health PR campaigns. That's not to say the other ones are bad, but this is certainly an original approach, and I do give them credit for that because it's an approach that isn't about wrapping people in cotton wool. It's not about sympathy. It's kind of trying to tap into, I guess, the alpha male mindset. Um, for the purpose of this video, I want to talk about mental health in relation to men in particular. Obviously, there's a lot of women suffer this as well, so it's not. It would be wrong to say it's entirely a gender issue. It's not, but it is a fact that there's a disproportionate number of men take their own lives from mental health problems, particularly depression. Certainly a lot higher than women. And that's not to say that women don't suffer this as well, because they do. So please don't think that's what I'm saying, but it's just a fact. So I want to talk from a male perspective now. I've decided to be candid in this video about my own experience because if I hide that, then I'm not really, I have no purpose to hide it. So I've been through severe depression. It's punctuated my life at times throughout my 20s, and it's not entirely gone. It's something I still periodically struggle with. And some people might say it's not something that you should put out there, but I respectfully disagree because we often see videos from what people have been through, and presumably they're talking from a point where they're feeling a lot more confident and out of the woods. Well, I want to make this video for someone who's basically going through this. It goes up and down, but it's something that I'm not out of. And I'm not going to give all the details about my private life in this video, but let's just say I'm not at the point in life where I want to be, and that really gets me down. One thing that's often discussed, and incidentally, there's been a lot of high profile people involved in this, from authors to sports people to just a wide range of people. The Prime Minister has said she wants to make it a big priority. Some would say that's hypocritical because the Conservative Party has cut funding to a lot of outreach centres, for example, charities like mine that are there for people. So I can't read Theresa May's mind. I can't read if she's sincere or not about it. It's good that she is talking about it, but it's a bit paradoxical for the Tories to make such, and I don't want to make this a political video, but it is significant. They're making cuts to public services. Some of those public services, people suffering mental health issues directly rely on one hand, and then on the other hand, she's saying, "Oh, we need to be a compassionate society that helps people with mental health problems." Um, the Liberal Democrats were talking about this years ago, to their credit, and they can be criticised for many things, but on this area, I do give them credit. They were one of the first major political parties to really take this seriously, and for that, I give them credit. Under Nick Clegg, incidentally. Um, but the whole issue with men and mental health, there's a lot of social angles to look at it from, and I'll talk about some of those in a second. But one thing I do want to talk about is the idea of stigmatization. Now, some of the focus of the campaigns recently has been about removing the stigmatization. I understand that, and I think it's a good thing, but I also think we have to be careful not to go too far the other way of, and I'm going to try and put this in as diplomatic a way as possible. I'm a strong believer that if you constantly portray people to be victims, then it can kind of backfire. So we hear a lot about stigmatization. I don't know how much stigmatization there actually is. And I think sometimes when you actually talk so much about a problem, it can sometimes even exacerbate the problem. So if you're saying there's a stigmatization around mental health, paradoxically, that can actually create a situation where people who don't necessarily have those problems then feel that they're walking on eggshells. So, as much as it's important to reach out to people who have these problems with depression and so on, and it absolutely is, it's also important. I mean, a big part of the focus is on telling other people, oh, don't treat them like freaks. Don't treat people who are suffering mental health problems as outsiders, as freaks. But if people feel like they're walking on the eggshells, if people feel that anything they say is going to be offensive, then they will feel like they're walking on eggshells. So the campaign has good intentions, but I'm not so sure if the constant focus on so called stigmatization is necessarily the best approach. Because the end goal is about normalizing this, is about saying that there are millions of people who suffer from these problems. So let's help them. But if the campaign is focused on let's end the stigmatization, it already then sets people out as being stigmatized. Now, I've been through depression. I don't particularly feel stigmatized. I don't feel like people are saying, oh, this guy has depression. I don't, that's just my own experience. Maybe other people do feel that way. But, I think there's good intentions there because it's about trying to remove the stigmatization, but I'm not sure if it's the best approach to constantly focus on that. And like I say, a lot of high profile people have been involved. Prince William recently spoke at an event. He mentioned the issues of male suicide and so on. There's kind of this debate within forums about mental health, whether it be videos or whether it be just generally social conversations. And one of the main questions is why are there more men killing themselves than women? Um, it's not that women don't also get depressed because they do. I mean, for example, women can suffer from postnatal depression, and there's other areas women could definitely be impacted by. But for whatever reason, fewer women go down the path of taking their own lives. So one of the main theories is that men are more closed up about their problems, and I think there's definitely truth in that. Now, some people blame feminism, some people blame the patriarchy. I think it's probably a bit of both, and let me explain why. Firstly, with feminism, um, whenever I've made videos about feminism, I try to be careful not to generalize. I try to be careful not to say that all feminists are the same, and I do believe that because when I've had difficult times, frankly, some of the people who've reached out to me have been female feminists, and I know they are because that's how they've described themselves. So my personal experience of feminists individually hasn't been one of kind of bitter man haters who are callous. That's not my personal experience. I have met those type of women, but some of the people I know in my own life have been nothing but compassionate in those situations, and they've called themselves feminists. So I don't think it's entirely fair to say that feminism leads to male suicide. I think that's nonsense. However, there are aspects of the movement that are definitely guilty of underplaying male problems. And this is a fact because, take for instance, Jess Phillips, the MP for Birmingham Yardley. She attended the now infamous committee in which the issue of International Men's Day was being raised, i.e., should this event be marked in Parliament, because International Women's Day is. Now, Jess Phillips' response, as far as I'm concerned, was a disgrace. She literally laughed when the issues were being discussed. She said, as the only woman here, I feel this is illegitimate. So she was trying to make this case that because she happened to be the only woman in the committee, the issues that were being discussed were not legitimate. Now, when you think about it, that would be a bit like, let's say you had a committee that was all women and maybe one or two men, and the issue was rape. Imagine if the one or two men in there said, rape isn't a legitimate issue, let's not talk about it. I see no difference. What Jess Phillips is saying is that we shouldn't talk about male suicide. Now, okay, she's only one individual, and it would be misguided to, give her more importance than she deserves. But it does, in my opinion, symbolize a problem, and that is this feminist narrative that men have it all and women are downtrodden. Now, there's no denying that feminists always talk about the patriarchy, and they always talk about how awful the patriarchy is for women. So it seems a bit paradoxical on one hand to say men are reluctant to talk about the problems, that's why they get into these situations. If on the other hand, when men's issues are brought up in places where it matters, i.e. Parliament, where legislation is made, and then the response is to basically silence it. So it's good that celebrities are speaking out about men's issues. I appreciate that. I think it's a good thing. But Parliament, men's issues are silenced. So it's a complete myth that we live in this situation where the patriarchy has all the power. I would argue at the moment it's we Britain today more resembles a matriarchy than a patriarchy, I would argue. Now, that's my criticism of feminism. They send out a mixed message because decent feminists will say, oh, men, you know, yeah, what will happen is feminists will blame patriarchy for causing the problems that men face. And I do think there is some problems in fellow male attitudes, and I'm going to come to that in a second. But what I would say to feminists is you can't say that you're sympathetic if you can't on one hand say, oh, but we do care about men's issues because we believe in equality, but then when men's campaigns are brought up, they're silenced. I'm not talking about mental health campaigners, but I'm talking about in Parliament. That's precisely what happened with the situation I just described. So the Prime Minister talks about discussing mental health issues. Um, if if an MP tried to raise these issues about disproportionate male suicide, the likes of Jess Phillips would try to silence it because they would say all men's issues get discussed all the time because of this myth that men have all the power. That's the issue I take with the feminist attitude to this. And what I would say to male feminists, with all due respect, especially those male feminists who may have had personal experience of issues like depression. What's your response to Jess Phillips' attitude? Now, people might say, okay, she is only one person, but she's a legislator. And if that is the attitude from feminist legislators, no wonder. No wonder there's a long way to go. Um, so that's where I criticize feminism for its attitude to this, by minimizing the problems. However, it would be wrong to just say, like I said earlier in the video, feminism leads to male depression. There's obviously a lot of factors that come into this that have nothing to do with feminism or feminists. And I do think that sometimes the attitude of other men is a big part of the problem. Now, is that patriarchy? I don't know, but certainly there is an attitude and a mentality that does not help. It's about manning up. It's about men should get on with things. And okay, there are some women who have this attitude, but frankly, it's a lot of fellow men who have this attitude. Recently, someone I know told me, "Oh, you're a grown man. You need to get your act together." And actually, it is for me. It's not just about gender. It's also about issues like age, because and this I think is something that's hugely underplayed. We have this mentality that when people get to a certain age, they need to settle down. And you know, I've had people say, "You're a 31-year-old man. You should have it all together by now." So I think that's part of the problem. But on the issue of the way men treat other men, you see it all the time. Actually, it is a big problem, and I do think there is also a social dynamic that has changed in this regard. If you look at old videos, say from the 1950s, like you see sort of men's men, if I could put it that way. I don't know, people like John Wayne. Okay, it's just an example. And the sort of comments you see are back when men were men. So if we think it's bad today, it was probably even worse in the past. Because in those days, men really didn't have an outlet. At least today we have a discussion going. So I think sometimes fellow men are to blame because they're callous towards their brothers, towards their fellow men. That's nothing to do with feminism. That's not the fault of feminists. That's you just being a dick to your fellow guys. And there's certain macho environments where this is very prevalent. You get certain sports. Boxing, without question, has this mentality. And that as a boxing fan, I'm interested in that because you get all the trash talking and get it's a real aggro environment. And boxers are expected to have a certain persona. They're expected to be aggressive. They're expected to get into the trash talking culture. And there is a huge amount of proving that you're a man in this sport. And for me, it's nothing to do with the physical side of it. I I'm fine with that, but there's a bit of hypocrisy, frankly. I mean, when Tyson Fury kind of took time out from the sport because he was suffering depression, a lot of people were saying they hope they gets better and so on. But I have no doubt a lot of the same people would be saying such and such fighter is a bum, etc. Not that I think Tyson Fury has helped. He's one of the biggest trash talkers around, so I've not a huge amount of sympathy for him. But um, all I'm saying is that as guys, we need to stop running down other men and judging other guys based on their supposed masculinity. Let's stop that crap because it helps no one. I think the only time it's legitimate is if the other man is hurting other people. So you're saying it from a point of view of calling that guy out on treating people badly. I think that's different. But when it's the way he dresses or something like that, that's totally I hate that. Live and let live. Don't So for me, that's a problem, and it isn't just in boxing or other tough sports. You get it in. It's very endemic in the emergency services, in the police, in the fire brigade, in the military. And the thing is, a lot of these professions are only now starting to take issues of mental health semi seriously. There is still a prevailing attitude that if you don't have if you don't have it together, you can't do this. And I totally understand that. I totally understand that you cannot be a soldier, for example, if you're starting from a point of being mentally fragile, because obviously if you're held hostage by the enemy and so on. But I am very wary of putting men in a pedestal where you sort of say, if you talk about this, you're being weak, and stop always whining. Now, obviously, it's not a good thing to always be complaining, and sometimes people do have a chip on their shoulder. I get that, but I really believe that something like depression, what people need to understand is it's not just feeling down and then you'll be fine in a few days. Depression can take years to overcome. Actually, it is a serious mental health problem, and there's so many things I want to cover here, and I'll definitely be making more videos about this subject. But all I would say is people need to have compassion. That's not about wrapping people in cotton wool. It's not about treating people like victims. What I would say, incidentally, I mentioned earlier in the video about helping people to understand who maybe don't have these problems, but they have a friend or a loved one who does. One thing that doesn't necessarily help, and this has been my experience, is overloading the person with advice. Now, sometimes that advice might be coming from a place of you think it will help them, and maybe it's good advice, but very often people who are going through depression feel a loss of control on their own lives. Now, if you bombard with them with advice, it doesn't help that situation. It only exacerbates that feeling that they don't have control. So, what I would do with someone else who's going through depression is say, look, I understand this, and I'm not going to tell you what to do, but this is my idea. I find that some people are a bit too quick to kind of impose advice, and they present it in such a way that it means well, and it probably does. But you have to understand that because someone is fragile, it doesn't necessarily mean they want you to treat them like a child. It may simply be a case of saying to them that you're there for them, and that if they want to talk about their problems, you will listen. That's all. Obviously, if they're doing something dangerous, obviously if the symptoms of their depression are actually hurting other people, that's different. What I'm talking about is if someone just seems a bit distant, if their behavior is changing, maybe if they seem like they're going nowhere. But on another point about that, I came across an inspiring video. Yes, it was a very nice video actually, and it made the point that everyone has their own time frame. So just because one person gets things done at 25 doesn't mean person B is going to get things done at 25. For them, it might be 35 or 40. Doesn't mean they're any less of a person because the 25-year-old may have a heart attack at 50. Everyone has their own time scale. And obviously, when you're living with people, when you have partners, etc., you have to be considerate to other people. But that's the other point I would make with people with depression. Don't expect them to get over it in a week, a month, or even a year. It can take a long time. And that can take patience. It can take patience to understand that, but you have to understand that they're not just trying to be a difficult person. They are genuinely struggling themselves to get in a place where they feel that they can handle life. By the way, the reason I keep licking my lip like I've got mouth ulcers is quite painful. Anyway, I'll round this up. I know the sound quality is not great. I've covered a few things here. Absolutely, there will be other videos to make about this because it's a very important subject. Um, no two people are the same, so you can't say that everyone going through depression has exactly the same situation. And depression, there's a wide variety of reasons why people go through depression. It could be because they have financial problems, it could be because it's relationship problems, it could be because they feel they aren't where they want to be in life. It could be a combination of things. So no two people are the same. So what might help one person wouldn't necessarily help person B. But what I would say would be helpful to everyone is simply saying to them, I'm there if you need me. So don't overwhelm them with advice. Don't overwhelm them with love. Don't don't kind of overburden them with love. That can seem like a nice approach, but it can actually put them in a position where they then feel they're being a burden on you because they feel that they have no self control. Um, as a 31-year-old man, I don't want people to tell me to get over it or to toughen up. But by the same token, I don't want people to be overly sympathetic. I don't want people to say, you should do this, you should do that, and treat me like a child. The best thing you could do for someone in my position, this is just my honest opinion, is say, look, I'm there for you. I'll listen to what you want to say. And I'm not saying you have to agree with what the person is saying, but if you really do want to be sympathetic, you have to listen to them. And you have to be patient as well, because this is not something that can be easily fixed. And that's what I liked about that advertisement with the boxing scenario, because it showed the guy in the garage just being a little bit distant, and it's realistic. He wasn't in a straitjacket in an asylum or something. He was a normal guy trying to get on with his job, but in the video it just showed him being a bit distant, and they sat him down like he was a prize fighter, and it was. I like the way they've done that because it's a different pitch, and if we can summarize it, and it's difficult to summarize mental health, but if we can summarize it, all I would say is it's very important to listen to people. I think that might be one of the most important things. It's not necessarily a case of telling them what to do in their lives. Sometimes that can only add pressure to them. Okay, thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts.